Happy Saturday morning. It is January 17th, 2026. Welcome to the Farm Show, Farm and Ranch, Missouri, right here on Westplex Talk 1045. We've got a big show today. We're going to start off by talking about a cattle event. We're going to hear some comments from Missouri's governor about agriculture and his commitment to rural Missouri. We're going to give a few other updates across the state of Missouri, and we're also going to talk about some bad news from Illinois that may have an effect on us here in Missouri. And in fact, it might be news that's already happening here in Missouri that will be confirmed in 2026 or 2027. How's that for a teaser? Before we begin, let's get into that beef event. Next week, starting next Wednesday, January 21st, the kickoff of the 2026 Missouri Cattle Industry Convention and Trade Show down at Margaritaville Lake Resort in Osage Beach. You might remember it as Tantera. We've talked about this event in previous weeks, so I'm not going to go through the details again right now, but you can find more information at mocattle.org. That's mocattle.org. The event starts next Wednesday and it goes through next Friday. And let's hit on the biggest national news of the week, the news that came out on Monday. From our friends at DTN Progressive Farmer, you can find this piece at dtnpf.com. The USDA report summary. USDA raises 2025 corn production to more than 17 billion bushels. Here's the news from DTN. And a surprise to corn market observers, USDA on Monday raised corn production to more than 17 billion bushels by bumping up the corn yield 0.5 bushels per acre and increasing harvested acres. The corn yield is now forecast at 186.5 bushels per acre, or BPA, way above analysts' pre-report estimates. USDA also bumped up harvested acres by 1.3 million acres to 91.3 million acres. USDA released its crop production annual summary, World Agriculture Supply and Demand Estimates, WASDE, quarterly grain stocks, and winter wheat and canola seedings reports on Monday. DTN notes that Monday's ending U.S. stocks estimates were bearish for corn, bearish for soybeans, and bearish for wheat, said DTN lead analyst Rhett Montgomery. Monday's world ending stocks estimates from USDA were bearish for corn, bearish for soybeans, and bearish for wheat. In other words, the takeaway for both U.S. and world was bearish. Specifically in corn, corn production is now pegged at a record 17.02 billion bushels, with yield forecast at 186.5 BPA and harvested acres at 91.3 million acres. USDA also bumped up the old crop carryover, raising beginning stocks by 19 million bushels to 1.551 billion bushels. On the demand side, feed and residual use came in at 6.2 billion bushels, up 100 million bushels from December. If we go to the soybeans portion, USDA said farmers have harvested 4.262 billion bushels in 2025, higher than the December estimate, but within the range of pre-report expectations. USDA left its yield estimate unchanged at 51 bushels per acre, while slightly increasing harvested acreage to $80.4 million. We'll skip ahead to wheat. USDA estimates U.S. wheat ending stocks at 926 million bushels, up from 901 million bushels in December's report. Feed demand is pegged at 61 million bushels, a decrease from 62 million bushels in December. Feed and residual use is estimated at 100 million bushels, down from 120 million bushels in December. You can find the full analysis of these USDA numbers by going to dtnpf.com. That's DTN Progressive Farmer, dtnpf.com. Mentioned earlier, Governor Kehoe's State of the State address, which took place on Tuesday in Jefferson City. Governor Kehoe, a cattle farmer, happen to make a few comments about agriculture and the state of rural Missouri as it relates to healthcare. Have a listen.
And while strong communities are built on protecting life through both safety and stability for much of Missouri, that stability begins with agriculture. From row crops to livestock, from research fields to rural main streets, agriculture remains one of the strongest foundations of Missouri's economy, because when agriculture is strong, Missouri is strong. Missouri's farmers and ranchers faced many challenges last year. Floods, fires, droughts, and tornadoes hit nearly every corner of our state, while fuel, fertilizer, feed, and financing costs climb higher than market prices. But while we may not be able to change the global markets from Jefferson City, we did pass several pieces of critical legislation to help continue a state where agriculture isn't penalized for producing. With our partners at USDA, we were proud to be granted a SNAP waiver that updates Missouri's food stamp program, emphasizing nutritious foods produced by the farmers that feed our state and nation. We expanded health care options and telehealth access in rural communities. And at the end of last year, the Trump administration awarded Missouri with more than $216 million in federal funding through our Rural Health Transformation Plan. This is in the top 10 of all state applications submitted for funding nationwide, another game changer for rural communities and rural health care. I would like to thank the work of our congressional delegation, our state agencies, and our health care partners in helping secure this win.
Probably the most important thing that every governor does during their Missouri State of the State address is lay out the main budget priorities. And in that vein, the folks from Brownfield Ag News reached out to Missouri Corn Growers Association. Reporter Kara Hart from Brownfield spoke with the Director of Public Policy for Missouri Corn Growers. That's Derek Steen. Here's what Kara writes about their conversation. Derek Steen says state lawmakers are facing a tighter budget this session, with roughly $500 million less in available revenue. Kara quotes Derek as saying, "There's going to be probably some hard cuts that are going to have to be made by the legislature and the state budget. It's going to take some additional time and effort." Kara writes that Derek says a renewal of ag tax credits would also be helpful for Missouri agriculture. She quotes Derek as saying, "They're going to sunset in 2028, and we'd like that sunset to be repealed so those tax credits can extend into the long term and provide long-term certainty." Kara continues, Steen says he's expecting a challenging legislative session due to tax and budget debates. But despite the hurdles, he's optimistic lawmakers can advance bills that support Missouri agriculture. To hear more from Derek, you can go to brownfieldagnews.com. That's brownfieldagnews.com. And if you're looking for a shortcut, go up to the search bar and enter Missouri Corn Growers Association, and it will take you right to this piece. And while we're speaking of Kara Hart, one of the best journalists in the state of Missouri, I'll also point you to her piece on the dairy industry. Her headline was, "Missouri Dairy Industry Sees Growth After Years of Decline." And Kara writes, "The new executive director for the Missouri Dairy Growth Council says the state's dairy industry is expanding after nearly 2 decades of decline." Kara goes on to write, "Alfred Brandt says on average, the state has lost roughly 8% of its dairies each year due to economic pressures, generational transitions, lifestyle demands, and industry consolidation." She goes on to quote Alfred and then says, "In the fall of 2025, Missouri Dairy had a push for a Missouri Dairy grant, which the beef guys got a grant also. So we've got 25 dairies in Missouri that are going to receive a $40,000 grant to help them with expansion." Kara goes on to write, "Brandt says Missouri has also attracted out-of-state dairies. A large California dairy is set to relocate to southwest Missouri, with milking expected to begin in spring 2027. Brant says Missouri is a great place to have a dairy farm. He says, quote, "We've got several large milk cooperatives in the state or nearby. The Dairy Farmers of America is located just in the Kansas City area. Prairie Farms is headquartered in Illinois. Central Equity Milk Cooperative is in Kansas and Missouri. We've got milk markets available for these guys if they want to come." Now, this is just an abridged version, what I just read to you from Kara's piece. And again, you can find the full piece by going to brownfieldagnews.com. Now, I mentioned earlier that there was some bad news coming from across the river in Illinois. Bad news, at least for row crop growers. A few weeks ago, we talked about the fact that the University of Missouri has confirmed that there is dicamba-resistant water hemp in the state of Missouri. Well, we got a disturbing headline from Rhonda Brooks from AgWeb. You know, AgWeb is run by Farm Journal. You can find this piece at agweb.com. Rhonda's headline reads, "End of an era? Glufosinate's tight grip on water hemp finally breaks." Here's how Rhonda describes the bad news. For many farmers, glufosinate quietly became the last dependable post-emerge option to control tough broadleaf weeds like water hemp in fields where glyphosate, ALS, PPO, and HPPD herbicides had already slipped in performance. Glufosinate's, quote, "last herbicide standing," end quote, status is why what's happening in Illinois now should grab your full attention. Rhonda continues, University of Illinois weed scientist Patrick Tranel and his colleagues announced in December that they have confirmed several glufosinate-resistant water hemp populations in Carroll County in northern Illinois. That confirmation is a big deal. Boiled down, what this means for farmers is stark. Every post-emergence herbicide in Illinois available to control water hemp in the state, 7 different herbicide groups, is now compromised to some degree. Tranel adds that some pre-emergent herbicide chemistries are also declining in efficacy. How that plays out in fields. He says pre-herbicides that might once have provided 4 weeks of residual control now keep weeds in check for only 3 weeks. Here's a quote. "Let that set in for a moment," Tranel says. "That means we can't just go out there and say, oh, I'm going to use this herbicide to control water hemp. You might not have resistance in your field yet to that particular herbicide, but it's out there in the state. And if you rely on that single post product, you are going to get resistance." That's the end of the quote. Rhonda writes, farmers in states outside Illinois aren't off the hook either. The problem of glufosinate-resistant water hemp is suspected in at least 6 other states. I'll give you a guess what one of them is. Yes, Missouri. The others are Indiana, Iowa, Nebraska, Ohio, and Tennessee. Here's a quote from Dr. Kevin Bradley, University of Missouri Extension weed scientist. Quote, "Missouri farmers are facing declining control of water hemp with 2 of our most common post products, glufosinate and 2,4-D, and that continues going into 2026. End of quote. Rhonda writes, why water hemp is a driver weed? Water hemp is considered a, quote, driver weed, end quote, for many row crop growers across the Midwest and the South due to its ability to severely impact yields. For yield losses, uncontrolled populations can cause extensive yield losses, up to 74% in corn and 56% in soybeans. That's according to University of Tennessee research. The dominance of water hemp. In the 2025 Weed Science Society of America, WSSA, Broadleaf Crops Weed Survey, water hemp surpassed Palmer amaranth, or pigweed, as the most problematic weed. There's also the biological challenge. The reasons for water hemp's dominance include prolific seed production, up to 1 million seeds per plant, season-long germination, rapid growth, and widespread resistance to multiple herbicide sites of action. One of the challenges of water hemp is subtle resistance and regrowth. Tranel from the University of Illinois calls what Illinois researchers are seeing the early stages of resistance evolution. Critically, what they observe isn't the obvious kind of resistance where the herbicide does nothing. This low-level resistance makes it difficult to detect in the field. Tranel says, it looks the same as what the symptomology looks like on glufosinate-sensitive plant, except not as severe. You're going to see that burning, but you're not going to see the continued progression of that control. You're going to start seeing regrowth. So that's apparently one thing to look for in our Missouri fields here. In Illinois field trials, resistant plants were sprayed small with full rates under near perfect conditions, so hot, humid, sunny, ample soil moisture, and still some water hemp survived. Tranel's research suggests some resistant plants may be able to detoxify glufosinate faster at higher temperatures. Tranel says, we actually saw worse control of the resistant population under higher temperatures. We think that's because the resistant population is able to metabolize or detoxify the glufosinate, and at higher temperature, it's able to do that faster. Now, here's where Rhonda gets into the state of Missouri. Kevin Bradley from the University of Missouri agrees with Tranel, reporting similar scenarios in Missouri. This low-level resistance can be easily confused with application issues, which makes confirmation difficult. Farmers often report poor glufosinate control due to weeds that were too big, poor spray coverage under a canopy, or less than ideal temperature and humidity. The quote from Pat Tranel. It can be difficult to distinguish between, do I really have a resistant population, or was my application not quite right? In the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and skip to the end of Rhonda's piece. She says Kevin Bradley and Pat Tranel are concerned about farmers choosing to trim herbicide programs. They both strongly recommend that farmers use full rates of herbicides, especially in fields with tough weed issues. Cutting herbicide rates will save few, if any, dollars. Kevin Bradley says, with glufosinate, we're talking pennies between lower and fuller rates. It's not going to be a whole lot of money to get better control of weeds and prevent them going to seed, Bradley says. If you want to read this full piece about glufosinate resistance, go to agweb.com. That's agweb.com, and go to the search bar and search for glufosinate. When we come back, we're going to hear comments from USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins. She's going to mention cattle. She's going to mention the farm economy. She spoke at the American Farm Bureau Federation convention just earlier this week. We'll have her comments cherry-picked to get the very best ones when we come back.